Yeah, so good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We are extremely glad that we could find a platform today to have these conversations around menstrual health and mental health. And it becomes that much more significant because May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and talking about mental health at the intersection of menstrual health is that much more important in this day and age, because it is something that is not really given the mainstream attention that it deserves. So before we get on to talking about what we are speaking today, I'd just like to introduce Belong to You and why we are doing this. So Belong is a platform that tries to provide that seeks to provide non-discriminatory services to people who face identity-linked discrimination. When we say that, we mean people who belong to minority religions, or your typical what you call people of other ethnicities or race or gender, sexuality, ability or caste, or various identity markers of that sort. And we have several service layers that include the Belong Mental Health Collective, which you are a part of right now today. I'll get back to that later. We also have a book club, which does very frequent author readings. We've had people like Sachin Kundalkar, Kavita Krishnan, Jonathan Gill Harris speak about various books that are themed around different aspects of identity and inclusion, and diversity, of course. We also have the housing service, which basically tries to become a platform to provide inclusive housing to people who are discriminated upon, or tenants that are discriminated upon because of their identity purely. We also have a research collective and also a brands collective that focus on discrimination and diversity in the fields of research and brand inclusion, respectively. So today we are here at the Belong Mental Health Collective's event. So the Belong Mental Health Collective was basically formed with the with the idea that yes, there is a lot of conversation that needs to happen around mental health, and we do not have enough therapists, or we do not have enough awareness in India or the world over about mental health. But where it becomes that much more crucial is people who face identity linked discrimination have that much more profound have mental health issues that are that much more profound. And various studies have also found that people who say belong to the LGBT community, people who belong to different castes or religions, face a lot more mental health troubles than the others. So the idea of Belong Mental Health Collective is to actually bring mental health services to people who face identity-based discrimination and make it more customized. And we are using the Mental Health Awareness Month, which is May, which we're in right now, to speak about it that much more. And one of the first events that we are doing is menstrual health and mental health, which you are here at today. So thank you so much for joining us. And why we are talking PCOD, PMDD, endometriosis, or various menstrual health conditions, and how that impacts mental health is something our panelists Asta and Sonal will discuss today. And we have so many numbers that we could discuss before we get into this, which I'm sure Sonal and Asta will mention during the course of the event. But just to talk about the need of it is, we were just going through the numbers, and 1 in 5 women have a PCOS condition, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, and 1 in 10 women have a PMDD condition. And PMDD is premenstrual dysphoria, dysphoric disorder. So I'm so sorry about that. And it's not just about when we this is the calculation, or this is the numbers we have for women, but we also need to make the conversation more trans inclusive and also queer inclusive, which is what some of us will be stressing upon today. And there there are I think a lot of us here are aware of what are the conditions and what are the symptoms, which is also something that will come up during the course of the conversation. But for right now, I'm going to hand it over to Asta and Sonal to speak and tell us a little bit about their work and why they think this is important to talk about. Sonal, maybe if you can go first.
Yeah, thank you, Lasya. Hi, everyone. I'm Sonal from Boond. At Boond, we work in all things menstrual health. We focus on social intervention, literacy programs. We do activism through art, and a lot of other initiatives. We have training programs. We also consult for policy, menstrual policy in corporate and in public sector. And what we're most likely known for in cities, at least, is our own range of sustainable products, period products, such as menstrual cups and cloth pads.
All right.
Yeah.
Asta, you need to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Belong, for actually doing this. And yeah, Lasa, you mentioned that this is the Mental Health Awareness Month, and that just means a lot to me personally. I'm a psychologist by profession, and I run this organization called Reboot Wellness. We operate out of Gurgaon, and we're a team of psychologists and psychiatrists and counselors. And we work together to, essentially we say that we're weaving a mat for all to stand on. We try to promote inclusive mental health. We try to provide, mental health services such as counseling, psychiatric services, support groups, etc., to the community at large. And I'm so glad that we're going to be talking about menstrual health and mental health, because these are both topics which are not, openly spoken of. So thank you for doing this, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And before we get into the questions or the discussion further, I would just like to give everybody a brief. I think we have a bunch of more attendees who joined in. So I'd just like to briefly tell everybody about the format that we're following for today. We have about a set of 8 to 10 questions that we will ask both Asta and Sonal to get a holistic perspective of what we are, the conversation that we want to take forward today. And that we are looking at continuing on with those questions till positively 6:30. If that goes ahead, I will try to maybe work around with the time. But for everybody, after the 6:30 slot, or after we finish the question discussions that we have prepared for them, we would want. We would start taking questions from the attendees. So please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, the Q&A box that you can see at the bottom of your screen, to leave questions. And I sincerely request everybody, please don't leave your questions in the chat box, because that can get very confusing for us. But if you do want to say something to the panelists, or if you want to comment on something, you can leave it in the chat box. But your questions, strictly please leave them in the Q&A chat box itself, Q&A box alone, and not the chat box. So diving into our discussion, I'll go with the first question that we have, and it would be great if both of you could take turns to answering it. And also, since I am not an expert, I probably just have experience. If there is any mistake that I do, please, with terms or with conditions, please go ahead to correct it. So the first question would be, if Sonal can take it first and then Asta can take it. The first question would be, people with PCOD, which is polycystic ovarian disorder, have 3 times the possibility of developing depression. The other angle in which we can see is, are people who have pre-existing conditions of anxiety and depression prone to develop a PCOD condition more? That's another way we can look at it. So the question part would be, can you help us establish the relationship between gender and mental health in reference to menstrual health conditions such as PCOS, PMDD, endometriosis, etc.?
Okay. Yeah, I think it can definitely be said that menstrual health and mental health, and gender coming in because there is menstrual health here. It's a complex relationship also, because this is tied around our complex hormonal systems. And these depend on the changing sensitivities in our body, and also sometimes they are cyclic in nature, and sometimes they can be erratic in nature. So this uncertainty and unpredictability that comes with it when it's not cyclic, or because of a certain condition where it's heightened sensitivity towards a hormone, in that sense, it can cause a lot of anxiety. And some of this is directly related to depression, because there's conclusive study to say that there is depression associated to it, but a lot of times it's not. And at the same time, I think it is important to understand that there are immense correlations with limited mainstream understanding on the linkages. So let us break it down into maybe simple somatic complaints. Most common complaints during periods would be breast tenderness or bloating. Now there's limited cognition in medical health delivery or institutional mechanism to accord any space to them affecting functionality, because breast tenderness is not going to have an immediate impact in what we do in our workplaces or in our homes, right? So that variance exists between mild to severe symptoms, but And sometimes they are fittingly recognized also, as in the case of PCOS or PMDD. And yet they are lacking in diagnostic and in turn social interventions, speaking largely of the gendered nature of health burden, affecting or affecting or even affecting rather our menstrual and mental health. Say something like menopause has been closely related to depression, and there is a lot of anecdotal reference across cultures, but there is no conclusive study on it. Right, it is not addressed or redressed in our society, with some grandiose assumptions that we can make towards psychiatric diagnosis in what we may think is acceptable behavior or norms in among menstruators. So there is little, not everything is studied, but definitely has a gendered nature to it. At the same time, there are certain things which have come to recognition and also have been addressed, such as postpartum depression. Yeah.
All right. I just have a small follow-up question to whatever you just said, Sonal. Since we were talking about recognizing, right? So if we are talking about menopausal depression, the possibility of more people reporting a menopausal depression, for instance, is much higher than a possible, because we are presuming that every menstruating body goes through that phase. The possibility of, say, somebody who is really young and has just been diagnosed with a PCOD or PCOS or PMDD or endometriosis, for instance, is probably not even recognizing that this is a problem and this is a mental health problem further. And also then the reporting is that much lesser. Do you think that is a possibility as well, that the fraction of cases being reported is much lesser, which is why the action oriented approach is maybe not as much as it is required?
If I may, I would approach it as a three-layered thing, a three-layered response, as in response to this action itself of recognizing. First is at an individual level, where we are constantly asked to normalize our pain, normalize any deviation from what is socially accepted or commonly acknowledged experience of menstruation. So if at 14 I had dysmenorrhea where I was in extreme pain, unless I called my mother in to show her, talking from my personal experience, I called her to show that I have a golf ball sized clot, I wasn't taken seriously.
Yeah.
Then the second level would be that of at a medical, one second, sorry, yeah. The second level would be that of at a healthcare, that with a healthcare provider, where normally it is, and I think a lot of people might also be aware, where a lot of people who go to doctors for PCOS, for diagnosis or for treatment, it is sometimes sidelined as a weight management issue, or often not looked at as a complex hormonal disorder, not checked for diabetes, not checked for, say, thyroid issues or insulin resistance, which is very commonly accompanied with PCOS. And the third thing, I think, is at research level and also at policy level as to how is what is the right kind of institutional response, like at a much larger response to young people coming up and talking about PCOS. So I think there has to be a change in response on all three levels. Hence, more people realize, then report, get diagnosed better, and also are offered treatment better.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that insight. Asta, just taking the same question to you, and maybe I'll repeat it. Can you help us establish the relationship between gender and mental health in reference to menstrual health conditions such as PCOS, PMDD, etc.?
Sure. So I think I'd like to begin by saying that, what Sonal already said, that there is more anecdotal evidence than actual conclusive studies on, such conditions. And, however, there was a study that I read by a nurse at Columbia University School of Nursing. And they did a study and they published it in the Journal of Behavioral Science and Research, which basically, behavioral health and research. And basically, they spoke of how there is a strong evidence that PCOS is a strong predictor of mental health issues in women. Now, why is it that there are mental health issues? And I look at it from a biopsychosocial perspective. Biologically speaking, or bioneurologically, speaking, it's a hormonal imbalance which impacts, our hormone levels. And a lot of these hormones are responsible for modulating a neurotransmitter called serotonin. Now, serotonin is responsible for our moods, right? So we often hear, slangs around, and often it's memed that how women get cranky or irritable, or all of that around their periods. There is a biological sensitivity to it. Now also with conditions like PCOS and PMDD, PMDD, in fact, the symptoms of PMDD ape that of clinical depression. And however, they are not recognized purely because they are put under the garb of PMS, hence not given the importance. And this is where the psychological and social aspects come in. Also, biologically speaking, with the elevated estrogen levels in conditions like PCOS and the insulin resistance, there is a direct, and there are studies that show that there is a direct impact on the serotonin level, which leads to uh, you know um, mental health conditions and concerns like depression, anxiety, and so on and so forth. Now, socially and psychologically speaking, I think Sonal briefly touched upon this as well, that socially speaking, we are not, and because there's not enough awareness, we don't focus on, the focus of when we get a diagnosis of a PCOS, or when a girl starts with her puberty, the focus is more on concerns like fertility, concerns like, physical appearance, and also with a PCOS diagnosis, which leads to, facial hair growth, hair fall from your head, and also concerns like obesity, insulin resistance. The focus is not on how it's impacting the mental health, or whether it can impact the mental health or not. And that is what makes it even more, if I may use the word, dangerous, because when we are not able to when we are choosing not to look at a certain aspect of a condition which is visible, that is when it's literally like blindsiding oneself and not looking at the condition holistically. And that is, and also and of course we will be talking more about this as we move forward. A lot of it results in a lot of psychological conditions, such as which may not be diagnosable disorders, but concerns like low self-esteem because of excessive body hair, or poor management of the syndrome because you're so occupied with feeling a certain feeling. So this is what I would attribute to the relationship between mental health and menstrual health, gender speaking.
Okay, thank you so much. I think you kind of encapsulated why we are actually having this conversation through your answer. Sorry.
If I may add
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
As I was mentioning about the complex hormonal system that it is, right? Just to give an example, things like insulin resistance insulin is one hormone, leads to generation of excessive testosterone. So
Yeah.
another hormone. Sometimes the presence of cortisol, which is a stress hormone, third hormone, impacts the release of estrogen, fourth hormone. Or the fact that we're not getting enough sleep at the right time, melatonin, might lead to increase in cortisol next day.
Yeah.
So, which is why a lot of times the way we treat, or the coping mechanism, is also very holistic, where we talk about lifestyle changes. But often we miss it that all of these things are interrelated, and we try to cure or treat only one part of it.
Yeah.
And this is, sometimes it's overlooked, I think, as individuals with these conditions. But it also often happens that our medical care providers or healthcare providers also tend to overlook it.
Yeah. That's
So it's important to discuss it with them.
Yeah, that is very useful. Thanks for mentioning that. Since we are talking about hormones and mental health, and also since we are talking about where it gets left behind and how it is blindsided, let's also acknowledge maybe that the entire conversation around menstrual health and mental health is still a kind of chicken and egg condition, because we don't really how far are we actually absolutely certain that are people with pre-existing mental health conditions more prone to developing menstrual health conditions, or the other way around, or is it both? So speaking about something like that, the next question would be the causes of PCOS or PMDD might be difficult to center around at the moment or ascertain what exactly they are, but some of the possible causes could be discussed as stress and societal conditioning. this would actually be the question would be, where can we place structural and institutional gendered oppression as the causes affecting people's menstrual health differently? Asta, could you take this first?
Okay, so like I was speaking earlier of how the societal conditioning is and revolves largely around, uh, I think it froze. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Sorry about that. I was saying that we've already spoken about how there is there's a societal conditioning, and the focus while looking at such conditions is on concerns like infertility or obesity, development of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and things like that, which sort of puts which shifts focus from what the concern is. And there is a reciprocal relationship between mental health and menstrual health, and they both do impact each other. And what Sonal earlier was talking about, stress and cortisol, and cortisol is a stress hormone, and when there is chronic stress, there is an increase in the cortisol level, which directly impacts our mood, our the bloating in our body, weight, there's weight gain, there is high blood pressure, low libido, low sexual drive, poor sleep, etc., etc., which further makes it difficult to manage such conditions such as PCOS or PMDD. And the reverse is possible as well, when there is with these pre-existing conditions, because the hormonal sensitivity and the concern around, because here ideas of body image, uh, uh, for a woman, the general idea of how a woman is looked at, or the gender roles that we establish for, which is centered around reproduction and things. I mean, all the conditioning that are present in the society tend to impact the existing condition more, because it adds to the already existing. There is already a hormonal concern. There is, your body is already dealing with a stress inside itself. However, there is an external stress also. There are external stressors as well, along with the psychological impact of all of this.
All right. Sonal, do you want to add to that?
Yeah. So I think social and gendered oppression could be a reason to exacerbate the pre-existing conditions of PCOS and PMDD, but there is no conclusive research to prove that it could be the other way around. Looking at it through a lens of gendered oppression, it might also be interesting to bring up that most of the research which is done on male bodies, and also to bring attention that menstrual health is perhaps one of the more under-researched biological functions as well. So keeping that in mind, we're not saying that, of course, there's some studies and some research which is done. Just 1 second. Is my video okay? Or
yes, your video is okay.
Something on the screen has changed. Sorry.
Just the brightness of the screen. Sorry. You can continue. Okay. It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was telling that looking at it through a lens of gendered oppression, right? One is that there is very little research done on women's bodies, because most research that does exist, even for medical conditions, the sample body that is taken is usually that of a male. And the second thing is that even among health conditions concerning women or menstruating bodies, menstrual cycle or menstrual health per se is a under-researched subject. And so approaching it more from a solution point of view, we're not suggesting that all kinds of medical symptoms, everything around menstrual health should be given utmost importance, like first importance, and then studied. But what we are perhaps requesting is that there should be social accommodation of the fact that a menstruating body undergoes change. To give an example, it could be, say, menstrual policies. Right now, when companies come up with menstrual policy, it seems inclusive and accommodating, because they say, okay, you can take leave on your first or second day of your period, not understanding that every menstruator's experience is very unique. Maybe someone with a PMDD might need that leave 1 week before the period, or someone with a PCOS who might have extreme cramps during peak ovulation, that is day 14, 15, or 13, 14 from their right after their period, they might need that day off then, right? So for us to understand that each menstruating body has a unique experience and to make adjustment and accommodation for it, I feel is supremely important. And yeah, I mean, that is definitely one manifestation of gender oppression, I feel.
All right. Thank you so much for that insight. Before we go ahead, I'm so sorry. I just opened the Q&A box and I realized there is one very pertinent question that we need to answer before we go ahead to my other questions. And the question is from Sabna. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing the name right, but it says, can you please explain your understanding on what menstrual health is? If one of you could go take a dig at it. So we're just getting down to the basics. I think if Sonal or Asta, if you can just, what is your definition of menstrual health? Menstrual, yeah.
Okay. I'll attempt. Menstrual health, for me, is an understanding of the period cycle, the entire menstrual cycle, complex system of hormones, and as all of us know, like our ovaries have eggs, the egg travels to the whole system. But what we study is that the egg gets attached to the uterus lining, and then eventually disintegrates and come out. But a lot of us are also taught that this is similar for everyone. The experience is similar. There is no mention of pain. There is no mention of disorders. And there are three very common disorders which I think we've been referring to, and I will just briefly touch upon that for the benefit of the audience. One is PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. The cause of this condition is not known. There could be multiple. Diagnosis is through either testing of hormones, and the most common being ultrasound, where they see multiple cysts on one's ovaries through sonography. And the second condition we've been referring to often is called premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Now, this is a mental health condition associated to menstrual health, wherein the body faces extreme distress such that it interferes with our physical life and also with causes a lot of mental distress. So it affects mental stability as well to some extent. There are 11 largely laid down symptoms, but most common being anxiety, depression, and one defining characteristic also being mood changes, because at least as someone with PMDD, I know in an hour's time I feel 5 different moods, right from being hysterical to crying outbreaks and a whole lot of things. So I mean, there's nothing you can do. There's decreased energy. So this is a intersection of like menstrual health and mental health, but also such that it is widely recognized as a mental health disorder. And the third thing that we've been referring to is endometriosis, wherein the uterus lining also grows outside of the uterus, and that can cause issues around infertility, and also it is extremely painful. And there is no known treatment for this as well. Some people resort to surgeries, but then I think there's 40% evidence that most of these, that this condition comes back despite the surgery. So yeah, that is menstrual health, what I understand of it, and also the 3 disorders we've been referring to.
All right. Thank you so much, Sonal, for that. Could we move to the next question maybe? Or if Asta, do you have anything to add?
No, I think Sonal covered it. So
covered it, yeah. Okay, so the next question would be, 1 in 5 women in India has a PCOS, yet there is little awareness and discussion around it. Most of the conversations, adding that to the 1 in 10 of PMDD number as well. So most of the conversations about PCOS and PMDD remain limited to infertility and weight gain, as we mentioned before, leaving gaps for myths and misconceptions to take over. So there'll be 2 parts to this question. What are some of the important myths one needs to bust about menstrual health disorders? And what are some of the other health and mental health consequences of menstrual health disorders that have not received enough attention? So what are the myths, and what are the other conditions? What are the other consequential conditions that need more attention? Would be the question in simple terms. Asta, could you go first?
Okay, so one of the, the myths around, I think Sonal will be a better person to answer the myths around the menstrual, concerns. However, something that is ignored largely when it comes to, diagnosis or the treatment of PCOS is the mental health aspect. There is little or absolutely no consideration given. I was personally, out of personal experience, I was diagnosed with PCOS over 20 years ago, and I was not given any education about what it is. So I think one of the big barriers there is that there is not enough education given. Also, it is not looked at in a very holistic manner. It is like you mentioned earlier, and I said earlier as well, that the focus is on, okay, you should not get type 2 diabetes, acne nahi hona chahiye face pe, there should not be, I mean, facial hair, fertility, etc., etc. So the focus remains largely, largely there. Some of the, and I mean, going on to the second part of the question, which is what are the consequences, mental health consequences that can happen? So of course, depression, anxiety is something that are fair, are far more obvious because of, we've already discussed that there is a biological angle to it, there is a psychological and social angle to it. However, it can also lead to concerns, mental health concerns like body image, body image or body dysmorphia, eating disorders. So there have been studies which suggest that there is an association between PCOS and eating disorders. Also, negative self-talk and extremely low body image, developing low self-concept, also inability to have, to establish relationships, because of the one is the, psychological impact of the concern that, okay, my body is not good enough. There is this constant desire to have that perfect body, because there is either an extra, hair on the face, or there is, acne, or, I mean, struggles are like this. I personally have been struggling with, overweight for all this while that I've been diagnosed. There is, which, puts a lot of pressure on developing relationships, and also it lowers down, I mean, it's said to lower down the libido or the sex drive of an individual, which also impacts developing, relationships. So these are some of the, secondary consequences that one can see as far as the mental health is concerned.
Yeah. Sonal?
Yeah. Nasya, could you repeat the first question for me again?
For the first part of the question, you want me to be, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there are two parts to this question. What are some of the important myths one needs to burst about menstrual health disorders? And the second part of the question, which Asta spoke about extensively, is what are some of the other health and mental health consequences of menstrual health disorders that have not been received sufficient attention, that have not received sufficient attention?
Okay. So for the first one, I'll answer it at two levels, one at a personal level and one, I think, more at the societal level. The first one being, I think it is important for us to understand that menstrual health is not just about those 3 days that we are menstruating. It's not about just period pain. It's not about just those 2 days of PMS that could possibly come with it. It is important for us to understand this is like a cyclic process, and it's a holistic, hormonal occurrence in our body, and each small component of the occurrence has bears effect in our everyday life. Could be somatic, could be mental, could be physical, could be emotional, and all of it needs to be addressed, and all of it needs our recognition and attention. And the second thing at the societal level is, let's take PCOS for instance. A lot of time PCOS is only diagnosed in early 20s, when women are of a fertile age, when they are expected to carry, basically be a tool in the patriarchal system where they can carry on the bloodline, right? Because if someone is unable to conceive, then they seek help, and in turn PCOS gets recognized. But then a lot of these menstruators might also have had problems or symptoms of PCOS from an early age. Like in Asta's case or in my case, I was diagnosed with PCOS when I was 14, right? And it is important that we start treating it as and when we diagnose it, because it doesn't make sense for us. Why should we miss out on 6 quality years? And I think with both PMDD, PCOS, and also endometriosis, we really, it diminishes our quality of life, right? So I think it's a menstruator or any individual's right to have a good quality of life. And if there is something that is coming in its way, they should get diagnosed and also seek proper treatment for it, and not wait until our body is treated as a tool for the society to, I don't know, for it to procreate, or for any other reason. It like health has to be a very personal thing. The second question is, I'm sorry, I have very short attention, but I did write it
No, I'll
down.
just get back to it. The second question is, which I think Asta covered a lot of it, would be what are some of the other health and mental health consequences of menstrual health disorders that are not
Got it.
mentioned?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just in 2 lines. So every physical aspect has a. I'm really sorry about that, but the Karnataka government has started.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Quickly, like every physical aspect has a certain mental aspect that comes alongside, right? Because that's how our body is wired. Now, keeping that in mind, if something like endometriosis happens, which does not have a lot of diagnosed or very visible mental conditions or symptoms that come up, but because there is extreme pain, with pain come other requirements, but that is not often met because it is not recognized. Whereas with postpartum depression, it is now recognized and then support is always given. So that is also required for other kinds of physical ailments that might come up.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. Before we move to the next question, I'd actually like to say that we have Laura here, who's also on this conversation with us. She's joining us from the UK. She got in touch with us through Twitter. She's the director of education and awareness at International Association for Premenstrual Disorders. She left a particular link on the Q&A section, and she says that PME is also worth considering. It's basically the premenstrual exacerbation of existing psychiatric disorders. She left a link on the Q&A box for everybody who wants to see what it is. Please go ahead and check the questions. And if anybody can't see what it is, please let me know. I'm also leaving this link of the message that Laura sent on the chat box for everybody to check. You might have to copy it because the link would not paste itself. I'm so sorry about that. But if you can find it in the Q&A box, you'll definitely be able to see what and read more about PME. Thank you so much for that, Laura. So we are just going ahead to the next question, and we might have to be a little quicker on this since we are already running out of time, but not running out of time, but running short on time. So the next question would be, menstrual health disorders cause changes in body types and often often make it look like what you perceive as masculine, which lead to anxiety around gender conformity and burden of appearing feminine, as we discussed before. Can you address this link and also the overall anxiety about one's body image with respect to being attractive? So we are now coming down to the individual aspects of it. So yeah, body image is the conversation. And also maybe I'll add the conversation of the bringing in the conversation about the consumption of birth control here. Are there any known mental health consequences to the long-term consumption of birth control medication for PCOS? If we could also speak about why we are talking birth control at this particular point is because speaking from personal experience, and also Sonal and Asa can go ahead and speak about this further, I think, is that when you're maybe diagnosed with PCOS or your gynecologist sees that you're diagnosed with PCOS, if the treatment is not coming from a holistic point of view, they first immediately put you on, say, fat reduction pills or birth control medications, which I was put on when I was in 8th grade, which leads to a lot of other problems like excessive weight, killing of sex drive, and etc., which both Sonal and Asta can elaborate upon. So yeah, how do we discuss the gender attractiveness question, especially when women feel this way about it, and also then the birth control question? What is the consequences or what are the profound impacts that they have on mental health? Sonal, Asta, whoever.
Can I go for
Would you
this?
like to take it? In the interest of time, I think we'll be.
We could. Asta, you can take it.
Okay. So one of the narratives that I have observed with the women that I've worked with over these years, or who have been suffering from PCOS, has been the narrative has been that they feel that there's a lack of control over their body and over their health, and that creates a lot of anxiety. So whenever we feel that, oh, my body condition, or I'm having all of these contraceptive pills, I'm trying to exercise, but nothing is happening. It's a long drawn process. And as Sonal has mentioned a couple of times earlier, that it's very cyclic. It's not, it's not a one time fix sort of a thing. That puts a lot of, that puts a lot of pressure on, on the looks part of it, or the, you know, or the body dysmorphia part of it, where one feels that my body is not good enough, and that's the general narrative. And what that in turn does is that it impacts, I mean, of course, it creates anxiety. And I have seen, I mean, this is from personal experience, and I'm not quoting any studies, from experiences that I have had with my clients. There are often eating disorders associated with, with a body dysmorphia as well, where because there is a very stereotypical understanding of how a female or how a feminine body should be, and this also brings to question how, when if we talk about queer or trans individuals, and how they how they perceive their menstruation, or their cycles, and if they have a diagnosis of PCOS or PMDD. So there is, of course, there is a very direct impact on the way an individual's body is perceived. It is not and because there is a low sex drive, so it automatically it sort of puts you on a backbench in identifying and actually going out and seeking validation for whether you are whether you are attractive or not attractive. And having said that, going on to the next part, which is your birth control bit. Again, there are no conclusive studies that I have come across yet about which say that okay, there is a direct impact of birth control on on one's mental health. However, there have been some anecdotal evidence about there's no significant data, but there has been evidence about their about mental health impact, and some of the concerns that have been seen are apathy, some neurotic or anxious behavior, and of course depression, which is so closely related to most hormonal conditions. However, something that I would like to say is that because there is so much of lack of knowledge and understanding around this, for as far as contraceptive pills is concerned, not one size fits all, right? So there are a few staple pills that are that are handed over by the endocrinologist or the gynecologist, which we take on face value, and we try and overlook the impact that it may have. If it is it making me irritable, is it making me cranky? I mean, sharing from personal experience, I was put on this particular medicine and I had it for almost 2 years, and what it did in turn was it increased my blood pressure at the age of 22, right? Which was, I was extremely young, and it increased my blood pressure so much that I couldn't, and I didn't realize it. It was making me irritable. It was making me extremely anxious. I was unable to, do a lot of, like, the quality of life, got impacted drastically. So not one size will fit all. It is a bit of a trial and error. I'm not going into saying whether, this is the right treatment or not. That's not my space to talk about. However, without there being any constructive or significant data available, there has been some evidence of the impact. And also, I think it's important for me to highlight that how does an individual perceive a chronic condition? That makes a lot of difference. Every month for 21 days, having to have a certain medicine, keeping a tap on, okay, when was my last period? When is going to be my next one? Will I, am I late? Am I early? How is my body reacting? I have to get waxing done very often, or, there's excessive hair on me. This on its own is very daunting. It's very heavy for anyone to take in, right? And it is just the way we deal with these conditions also makes a lot of difference, and there's not enough. And in fact, there's no conversation around it, and we're just expected to deal with it. Yeah. However, I think this is where we need support. How does it make me feel to have PCOS? I have PCOS and it has all of these conditions, and it is making me depressed and anxious and all of that, and I'm trying my best to manage it, but how is it making me feel? How do I relate to having such a condition month after month after month, where I'm bleeding and at the same time trying to figure out, am I bleeding the right amount? Am I, is everything okay? Is my body ticking well? And etc., etc. Then again, the social conditioning and all of these things put together, it's a bit much. And that's how I have been able to sort of understand a lot of my clients when I ask them that, how is it making you feel? How do you feel to have this condition?
Yeah.
And Sonal, Lasya, if you don't mind, there was a question in the Q&A which I had which I saw, but I think by mistake I dismissed it. I was trying to answer it.
Do you remember what it was on the terms of?
I'll just because I'll just sort of finish it with that.
Yeah.
The question was that as a mental health professional, I'm presuming a mental health professional asked that question. She or he said that they find it difficult to deal with individuals who have endometriosis, because the pain is so much that they're unable to manage, and it often leads to anxiety and depression and all of that. So I think the question was, what is it that they can do, or is there any reading material or resources? I'll try and share some if I can on this. I'm not sure of any specific resources, but how I have dealt with such concerns in the past with my clients is to first focus on the more presenting symptoms, if there is excessive anxiety or depression. To work on those, on the presenting symptoms, come to pain management, how they can manage pain, and then go about talking to the client about what the other concerns are. But to I would ideally begin with the presenting symptoms of depression or anxiety or any other concern that there is.
Okay, thank you so much. So in the interest of time, I think, yeah, I'm just going to give the next question. And also thank you for that, Asta, because I think you really set the tone for the event with the previous answer. The next question, I'll give it to Sonal. Sonal, can you talk about the relationship between PCOS and PMDD and discuss the means to track them? How do these conditions affect one's life?
Okay, few things then. The first thing is that both of these are actually two separate disorders which are not to be confused. I did describe them briefly at the beginning. Both of them, however, I'll also talk about the commonalities since we discussed how they're distinguished. Commonality is that both of them are hormonal disorders. There are two ways to look at it. One is the production of hormone. Second is the sensitivity towards the hormone. So in terms of production of hormone, say in PCOS, insulin hormone could be more in the body because the body's decreased receptivity towards it, whereas testosterone might be excessive, whereas in PMDD, serotonin might be less in the luteal phase. So that is in terms of quantity of hormone that is being secreted within our body. The second way to look at it is with the lens of sensitivity. So sometimes our bodies are less sensitive to certain, again with insulin, right? Because body is less sensitive to absorbing insulin and hence processing it. So there is a problem of less sensitivity. There's also increased sensitivity as with the case of PMDD, which is why if someone has PMS, and there's heightened emotional sensitivity, if we see something which is very moving or touchy, we would cry. Right, so it might need a trigger, but definitely it was building in because it was hormonal. Whereas with PMDD, the sensitivity is so heightened that we don't need these things. Our mood changes are so much that there will be outbreaks of cry without any trigger, without anything, because it's so much. Like even a little bit of estrogen or testosterone or progesterone can really create a lot of changes in our body. So that's the commonality, that both of them are hormonal. But other than that, both of them are different disorders. It can also happen that there are people, example me, like myself, who have both. In that case, it becomes slightly trickier because one cannot, PMDD usually shows up in the second part of the menstrual cycle. So there's a follicular phase and there's a luteal phase. We can look them up. In the interest of time, I'm not explaining. But when one has PCOS, it's also very difficult to track when does the follicular phase come to an end, when does a luteal phase start. So then medication is usually given only for luteal phase, and that becomes problematic. So then you're on antidepressants or whatever one's medication, antideps being the most common, are given throughout the cycle, that in case causing further, it has its own nuances and causes has further implications. So that could be, I think, answering the first and the second part, which is about what are the commonalities and also what is the relationship, if at all they are together. Then the third thing is how to track them. For PCOS, there are symptoms. One can Google them. I think Asa also mentioned that there could be body hair, facial hair, excessive weight gain. There's also some amount of mood swings, but not as prevalent
Acne.
as in acne, and most common being irregular period cycles. So
Yeah.
sometimes you don't get a period on time, and sometimes it can go months. Sometimes it's just very often spotting happens. So it's like
Yeah.
a whole bunch of things. PCOS is actually fairly well recognized in India, which is also why we have at least some data around it. Best way to track it would be to track symptoms, but also more than anything, track one's period cycle. And for diagnosis, one must definitely get an ultrasound to rule out polycystic ovaries. And the third thing would be to get our hormones tested when we are on our period. So a gynecologist or an endocrinologist must be able to help us diagnose it. The thing with PMDD is to track it, one has to maintain a mood diary at least for, I mean, it's recommended 2 to 6 months. And usually we have like a list of 11 symptoms given, of which there are some physical symptoms and some mental symptoms. There, if one has 4 or more or 5 or more, and with at least one mood disorder, which is a mental disorder, then one gets diagnosed with it. But it is important to keep a mood diary as to how are we feeling. So 10 days or 14 days before the period, we start recording every day how we are feeling. Was there something that triggered us, or in case we eat excessively, or we're not, just general lack of enthusiasm in life. And sometimes it's so bad, like again talking from personal experience, I would be having a very just the usual fine day, but then I'd be having breakfast and I can't lift the spoon anymore, and for 15 minutes I'm just there staring into abyss, not doing anything, because energy drops. And then suddenly there'll be a little bit energy for 10 minutes, and again you'll have to work around, and this might go on for an hour or two, right? So there is definitely a pattern which disturbs. And then this has also happened with me at an airport where I fainted because my blood pressure fell, and because I was absolute lack of energy. So PMDD is such a thing that if you have it, you know you have to seek help, because it really disrupts one physical work life relationship. Because if someone is so emotional towards certain things, it takes a while to say, oh, this is not perhaps just me, and this is my hormones. So
Yeah.
that's one way to track, register symptoms for PMDD. And then so as a gynecologist diagnoses one with PCOS, a psychiatrist would be the right person who can diagnose someone with PMDD.
All right.
And PMDD is fairly new in the sense that it has been diagnosed as and recognized as a mental health disorder only in 2013.
Okay. All right. That. Thank you so much for that. Actually, the next couple of questions we had planned were around um, doctors and prescription medications and sex drive and anxiety, which I think we've already covered. And there's also one question regarding the conversational gap between, say, the mental health and menstrual health disorders, which is also, I think, we extensively spoke about through our conversation before. So I'm trying to skip that so we can quickly move ahead and answer people's questions. There are a bunch of questions already. But going for the, I just like to add something to everything that you have, both of you have spoken about, which would be, I think, one of the, because since our next question is anyway about coping mechanisms, and we've stressed enough about lifestyle choices, one of the things that we should really watch out for when we are living with such conditions is probably the onset of diseases, like Asta mentioned before about type 2 diabetes. There could be cardiopulmonary diseases that would emerge out of this. I think what doctors don't really intimate to you early enough is that you need to be very watchful about your, say, blood sugars, thyroids at the same time. Like Sonal mentioned, the endocrinology is also a very important part of this. So type 2 diabetes is, it's PCOS, PCOD is considered like a precursor to type 2 diabetes, for instance, in a lot of women, or a cardiopulmonary disease, or maybe some sort of cancers also, I think some researchers have found out. So those are the things. But then we'll move to the next question in that relation, is that of course, yes, lifestyle changes we are talking about, but what are the best coping mechanisms to strike that balance between menstrual health disorders and mental health? If both of you could take turns answering that, then we could quickly move on to audience's questions.
Sure. Can I go first, Sonal, or would you like
yes,
to?
Please. No, please. I was going to suggest you.
Okay. So coping is, of course, there is one form of coping that we're all told, that lose weight, be more energetic, sleep well, eat less sugar food. I mean, sugar which is I mean, food which is less in sugar content, all of those. These are some of the lifestyle changes that are extremely important. And exercise is something that helps the most, because not only does it address the physiological concerns, but also things like anxiety and depression. But a lot of times it may not be, possible. For coping, I think it's one of the important things which can facilitate coping is awareness and conversation. And I've been talking to over the years, I've been talking to a lot of gynecologists and trying to educate them about, and just not educate them, but sensitize them about the mental health impact of of such conditions, out of personal experience and out of the experiences of the clients that I've been working with. So one is to educate yourself, recognize everything that you're experiencing at a physiological level, at an emotional level, and even at a cognitive level. Also, along with that, having a good support system, in terms of which can also be a professional support system, that can be helpful. And things like self-care, self-talk is something that I emphasize a lot on. What is a conversation? How are you talking to your own self about everything that you're experiencing? That makes a lot of difference. So coping essentially comes from there.
Okay. Thank you so much. Sonal?
Yeah, it's quick summary. 4 things. First is understanding one's own body, documenting symptoms. Second is building a healthy support system. As Asta said, have opt for psychotherapy if you need to. I found CBT and NLP very helpful. Third is aerobic exercise, and eating right and being mindful. Mindfulness generally helps with anxiety. I cannot emphasize on the importance of losing weight. I know a lot of times we feel that it is an easily sidelined thing where nothing else is being looked at. But from personal experience, I know the minute I lost my 10th kilo, my cycle was back on track. I could realize that I was unhealthy all these years in the past. So that's the third thing: diet, exercise, and mindfulness. Fourth one, I think, is acceptance that we have this and this is our reality, and seeking medical help. So when I say medical help, I'm going to list down a few things if it works for some people: hormonal, psychological, physical, checking for mineral and vitamin supplements, because B12, D3 is directly related to associated with depression link. And and then eventually, if one needs antidepressants, then to go for it, or any kind of psychiatric medicine, and not to have any stigma or shame around it, right?
Yeah.
So I feel those are the 4 things that usually help. And putting all of this together, I just call it planning work more mindfully, because if we know that we have this condition, then just also like accept it and integrate it in our regular plans. So
Yeah.
time and energy management are super important at work, and I think even in relationships, to say that yes, I have this, and I would really appreciate it if you were mindful of my conditions. Or sometimes if I get overwhelmed, can you please calm me down, and can we sit and discuss this? To recognize it and also enable our caregivers to give us that best supportive system.
Yeah.
There are, if I may mention, IAPMD, as Laura had mentioned, is a good resource to go to. That's something I go to as well. There is also support groups for people, for caregivers of people who live with PMD, because it can really, really get very erratic, and suicide or tendencies of suicide also is a common symptom.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much. And as someone who has had her periods regularly for the last 5 years without any medication, I have to second everything Asta and Sonal said is absolutely true. I have also developed type 2 diabetes because of PCOD, but yeah, lifestyle changes does it all, guys. So we'll quickly jump into the questions. And first question from Sneha. I think I'm going to stop taking any new questions that come in because we are dangerously out of time. The first question would be to Sneha, from Sneha. So there are times when it is said that during endometriosis, the patient knows more than the doctor. Is it comparatively unknown, and the response is mostly of, it is comparatively unknown and response is mostly of panic from the health workers as well? I was told to marry and have a kid as soon as possible. The day I was diagnosed after a 5D ultrasound, whereas that was the day she was diagnosed after the 5D ultrasound, whereas now I am on contraceptive pills / hormonal pills, which have their own side effects. In this situation of confusion, what should one do? Either of you, Asta, Sonal, anybody? I think the primary question here is about when the doctors themselves panic. how do you handle something like that?
To say extremely candidly, change your doctor. It is important, and believe me, I have changed doctors for years, and I mean, I must have changed about tens of doctors up till now, till I found someone who just fit my bill and actually understood what I was going. Because along with having PCOS, I also am a thalassemic minor, which made it extremely difficult for me to manage, because there was a lot of my hemoglobin came down to 6, and there were a lot of other comorbid concerns as well. Change your doctor if your doctor is not, if you're not satisfied with what your doctor is suggesting. I don't usually encourage reading up online, because we don't know the kind of information there is, how reliable it is, or how relevant it is. However, trying to find your perfect fit for a doctor would be the best way to go. Also, like Sonal mentioned earlier, there are there are resources available which are more legit, which you can use to educate yourself and to understand what your concern is. So yeah, I mean, to put it very simply, have someone who understands your condition.
Yeah, and even if that requires someone who's not constantly telling you to say do the conventional marry and have a kid, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's one of the points that Sneha happens to mention.
Yes, because again, see, then the focus has shifted already. The focus has shifted from what the what the person is actually experiencing to you have to marry, you have to conceive. So again, the focus is on fertility, reproduction, etc., and not on the person.
Which there is an assumption that someone wants to conceive.
Yeah, that too, or get married for that matter. Yeah. It's always important that you find your own fit.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for that. The next question is from Manisha Lohan. Thanks for the discussion. She says, at the time of menstrual period, the first day I can't eat or drink anything. If I eat or drink anything, I'm vomiting. The pain is too much. I think this is more on the lines of, say, trying to identify her condition, I think. But if anybody knows of any, what this could be like, I'm vomiting occurs, the pain is too much. Like, is this a eating disorder related question? Did you guys get the question?
I can't diagnose an eating disorder just by saying that there is vomiting, on the first day. And also, we don't need, we don't need that kind of diagnosis. It can be completely physiological as well, because if it happens only on the first day of your period, then it can be completely physiological. Maybe Sonal can, shed more light on that. But I don't think I would diagnose it as an eating disorder so quickly without getting more information.
It is likely to be a physiological condition, as Asta was saying. This is also a fairly common thing. A lot of people don't feel like eating. Also, there is like one's lactose intolerance. Sometimes is anecdotal reference. I think, again, a lot of research can be done that the body doesn't seem to take dairy very well on the first day of the period. If there is acute pain, and I'm not someone who takes a lot of medicines, but because I have PCOS and my menstrual history is fairly distressing, this is one time I don't shy away from taking medicines. Please talk to your gynecologist. They can put you on painkillers. And also for extreme pain, I think gynecologists in India now don't shy away from giving us ketorolac shots or other kinds of very like relieving painkillers. So there's definitely a treatment for this, or coping mechanisms for it. Find a good gynecologist.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the best answer we could give, because we can't, none of us here are actually doctors to actually diagnose the problem, to be very blunt. So this is definitely something you need to take.
But it is common. There is nothing to worry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a very interesting question by an anonymous attendee, which I think Asta, Sonal, whoever feels more comfortable taking. As a man, how can I support my partner if she or if she is he or she is going through PMS or any menstrual health condition that we are discussing about, which also affects mental health?
I think the first thing that you can do is accept the fact that it's real. And often PMS is, sidelined or disregarded as, it's just a woman thing. You're just like this, or, ye to hota hi hai. So the first and the most important way to support your partner in this would be to recognize that she's actually feeling something. right? I think begin from there, and and then asking her what is it that she would like, or what is it that can help her ease her pain, or her mood. Would she like some more space? Would she like would she like some a hot water bottle, or something that can work around, maybe medical attention if need be. But begin by accepting. I think Sonal put it beautifully when she said that the four things that we need, and the most important of them all is acceptance, not only by us as individuals who are suffering from these conditions, but also by our caregivers and partners. Sonal, would you like to add something?
I think recognition, acceptance, talking to one's partner, and definitely not assuming. I think especially in the case of PMDD, we assume, I've read this online, so it must be that, and not understanding that the case is truly unique to the experiencer. So just having that conversation, and not having the conversation when they're having an episode, like talking to them when they're fine, and just having that conversation. I guess recognition, acceptance, and conversation.
All right. There's one question that Laura actually asked a while ago, which we seem to have answered, but I feel like this needs to be addressed live as well. What role does stigma play in India on menstrual health and premenstrual health education and awareness? Have there been improvements on this in recent years? Asta, do you have anything?
Okay, I'll start, and then maybe Sonal, because she works directly in menstrual health.
Yeah.
Of course, stigma. I mean, if I look back at my own, life cycle, and I look back at the time when I started, when I had my first period, my first reaction to my mother was, I remember my mother taking me to to the toilet and telling me, this has happened, and I didn't know anything before that. So there was no education. I started at the age of 11, and there was no education given to me before that. Also, I told her, Mom, you have to swear on me that you will not tell anyone that this is happening to me, because there was so much of shame attached to it. There was so much of hush hush around it. Yes, the stigma has gone down, and I think movies have come out, and discussions have happened, and conversations have happened, and organizations like Sonal's are creating more and more awareness on such concerns. The stigma is shifting, is going down. We no longer get our sanitary napkins in black polythene bags. That shift is happening. But yes, stigma plays a big role, because it disempowers you to acknowledge what you're feeling, and it disempowers you to recognize anything that you might be experiencing when you start with your menstruation or premenstruation. And of course, education. I can't emphasize on that more.
Sonal, would you like to speak more about that?
Yeah, I think the stats, understand stats, and then how.
Sonal, 1 second. I think your voice is breaking, and your microphone seems to be moving a little bit, which is creating disturbance. Yeah, can you try again?
Is this any better?
Yeah, slightly better. Yeah, go for it. Sorry okay. For the interruption. Yeah.
No problem. So mid 2010, say about 4 or 5 years ago, DASA released a report saying that 70% of Indian mothers still feel that menstruation is a dirty process. Right? So till about 5 years ago, we were still standing at those stats. Having said that, as I mentioned, there have been campaigns, there have been movies, etc., talking about this issue. But a lot of the narrative has always been that of purity, has been that of menstrual hygiene, and largely focused on the product, and never about menstrual health at large, or talking about iron deficiencies, or talking about menstrual PCOS or endometriosis or other things, right? It's always about menstruation and fertility and stigma and product. But I think it's high time we recognize that product does not equal to empowerment. Like only product does not equal to empowerment, and there's so much more to be discussed and worked in the realm of menstrual health. Which is why I feel like now the conversation and narrative has to move from hygiene to health. Because yes, we recognize there's a problem, but this is a larger problem, and that does not stop with access to product. Access to product definitely is important, but it cannot be the termination of health. subject of the discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much. The next question quickly would be from Sivangini Kumari. What could be the possible solutions to reduce the effects of menstrual problems like medication? I think this is something we've already discussed as the coping mechanisms, Sivangini.
Your voice is breaking. I'm not sure if this is for me or for all of us.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Is it better now?
Yeah, that's much better.
Sorry, I think there's one question from Sivangini, which is about coping mechanisms, which we've already covered in the questions that we've asked, which is what could be the best solutions to deal with it. I think best solutions, as we discussed, were lifestyle changes, and then everything else. I think this is already something that we discussed. And also for diagnosis, none of us are doctors, so we'd really recommend you go to a psychiatrist, gynecologist, endocrinologist, as we discussed before. But there's something Kunjan Aluwalia said that on the chat box that I'd like to read out. Kunjan says, I had my first period when I was 9 years old. Till now, I have tried allopathy and many other options to deal with PCOS. Alternative medication like naturopathy has helped, and I have my periods and also manage unwanted hair growth. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Kunjan. And somebody else also raising their hands. But I think we're kind of done with most questions. I would actually like to let everybody know that most of the questions that you have asked have been answered in the Q&A box by Bharti from Boon. So thank you so much, Bharti. You could all actually, in the next few minutes, go to the Q&A box, answered questions, and see the answers that you've, I think a bunch of questions by Ipsa and Sekar, etc. A lot of your questions have been answered by text, via text by Bharti. So you could just check them there itself. While
if I may also quickly address Anju's question, where she says that she feels these problems should be tackled naturally and not by popping medicines. With respect, at least with PMDD, which is a mental health disorder, or with PCOS, we've already discussed, is that when you go see a psychiatrist or you see a gynecologist also, first things anybody tells a patient is not to pop medicines, but is to do a lot of things. But with mental health disorders, and I'll definitely talk more about it, it's really hormonal, and beyond point, we cannot manipulate our body into releasing extra serotonin, extra endorphin anyway. So it is essential to rely on medication when it is required, like they're supportive. I'm saying this as someone who refused to take PMDD medication for almost a year, and then finally gave in, and I see how much my life has gotten better since. So I mean, all of us do want to go without the pills, and in PCOS, I started with medicines and eventually I went off, and now I'm actually on my own. So there are different approaches for different people, and it's okay to have an opinion to oneself, but I think it's also it also would be nice to encourage people to explore what works best for them and not have a one-size-fits-all solution in this case.
Yeah. Anything you would like to add to that, Asa?
So I think, of course, I understand where the concern of not popping pills is coming from. However, we need to see and understand the severity and the complexity of the condition and one's own, coping mechanism. I mean, as a psychologist, I also don't resort to, I can't prescribe pills, but I don't, if someone comes to me with, depressive symptoms or anxious symptoms or, concerns like that, my first thought may also not be medication. However, it's important for us to realize when is it that we need pharmacological support and respect that at that. If their symptoms are severe, because in concerns like PMDD, suicidal tendencies, extreme, helplessness, extreme depressive symptoms can also prevail, and that is when, for us to actually to be able to do something about it, one needs to come to a level of, basic functioning, and that is when pharmacological support can be, helpful. Also in pain management. I mean, if my physical body is in pain, and I will not be able to work on how I'm feeling or what I'm thinking, or any other management. However, it cannot replace or reduce the impact of exercise and healthy lifestyle choices and managing food, eating well. There is no replacement for it. Medication is definitely not a replacement for it, but both are, I mean, medicine is, any form of medication is important when it is important. And however, lifestyle choices are a compulsion. That's what I would say, because the impact of a good lifestyle and good exercise and good movement is far more long lasting than medication.
Yeah. And it's also not any one answer. I think it should be a combination of
Absolutely. Like I said, not one size fits all. We need, and I think Sonal has emphasized on this so many times during our conversation today, that you need to figure out what your body, is all about, and how your body is responding or reacting to it. And I mean, just to share, I was reading somewhere that there has been a gradual drop in the oral contraceptive usage, in the last 5-7 years, and one of the reasons that has been attributed to that has been good lifestyle. So if you can do it, then why not? But then to be able to do that, like, I'll give you an example. I have bled continuously for 4 months.
Yeah.
It didn't leave a lot of energy in me to exercise, though I knew that exercising will help me bring my PCOS in control, but I couldn't do it because my hemoglobin had fallen. So what do? I need to take medication. I need to have that pharmacological support so that I'm able to do what I need to do.
Yeah. Exactly. I think I have a similar example. Like I have bled for 50 days, 2 months, 3 months. And when you can't move, how do you gain the
How
life?
do you exercise?
Yeah. I think once you sort one thing out, then you can move on to the next thing. Yeah. But exercise, like Asta said, is the long lasting solution to something like this. Yeah.
Yeah.
And lifestyle changes. Eating right also. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we're mostly done with the Q&As, and I hope everybody who's asked questions has had the chance to go through the answers that Bharti has left for you in the last 5-6 minutes after I announced it. But I would just like to gather some parting thoughts and any other comments that either Asta or Sonal would like to add before we wrap up.
I think I'd like to conclude by saying that, first of all, it's great that we're finally having a conversation and recognizing a mental health impact of something that all women experience in their lifetime. They might not all be diagnosed with PCOS or PMDD, but we all menstruate, and there are complexities and concerns around it. And how it impacts our mental health. It's very important to spread more awareness, to educate ourselves, and to have a more holistic approach in dealing with our menstrual health. So not deal with it in isolation of reproductivity or fertility or physiological concerns, but also social and emotional concerns.
Yeah, Sonal?
I think a lot of what we discussed was touching upon several points. Again, looking at it holistically from the point of diagnosis and the existing pressures that we might have, or our medical profession might have, or our society might have, be doing all of these things. And really also be kind of ourselves. That would be important. On the parting note, I also want to add that there is a contraceptive called Daily, which is purely which is a non-hormonal based, hormone-based contraception. So that's something new that I recently came across, and I am interested for those who are trying to explore something of that sort. Since we're talking about this, I thought it might be interesting.
All right. Thank you so much. And I hope people are leaving us nice comments on the chat. Thank you for this nice, kind words, Nikita. And thank you so much, Laura, for joining us. We hope to get in touch with you again. And like Sonal mentioned before, there is a lot of information out there on PCOS in India right now. But if you'd want to read more about PMDD, please check out IMPND. It's a UK-based organization. And we have left the link in the chat box and the Q&A box as well. You guys can read more about PMD there. Yeah, that's more about it. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you Sonal and Asa for being so patient in answering all the questions and speaking about something so important, and also Bharti for really just getting on all the questions. We couldn't have done it without you, so thank you so much. And everybody who asked questions and participated, thank you so much for sharing your journeys with us. It really means a lot to all of us that you have been you found us you found a safe space in us to talk about these things. We'd only like to do more and bring more conversations of the sort through the Belong Mental Health Collective, and also I'm sure Boond and Reboot Wellness. We aim to bring these inclusive conversations to you as regularly as possible. So please keep joining us. And if you have any feedback, you can write to mentalhealth@belong.net, or contact@belong.net, or lasya@belong.net, lasya@belong.net, and all the belongs with a double G. And if you'd like any more questions to be answered or anything else, you can again write to us in the mentioned email IDs, and we'll try to get it across to the panelists if possible, or you could reach out to them if they would like to answer the questions themselves. But yeah, that's more about it. Thank you so much, and I hope you all have a good day. Yes, Sonal, you were adding something.
Yes, hello. Hello. Your voice is being, can I add a quick one-liner?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. 1 second. Your voice is breaking for me. So yeah. Go ahead, Sonal.
Okay. I just want to share that we do a lot of conversation around mental health at large, including these disorders on social media. We're doing stuff on Instagram, and also please feel free to reach out to us. My email is sonal, sonal@bwfdh.co, and we'd be happy to see that there are mental health educators, mental health educators. There are people who would like more support and resources around this subject, and we'd be happy to collaborate.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much. You could reach out to Boond on social media, I think is what Sonal said, if Sonal's voice was breaking for anybody there. We'd also, if you just write to us and you need the contacts and did not register any information, we can pass it on to you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Sonal. Thank you, Asta.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.